Good evening, everybody. This is the group 10 for today we are gonna presenting our material for the literary criticism subject. Our material for today's evening is Orientalism. All right. Before we get to the material, let us introduce our team members. We have Kevin Apilitistira, and me, Andiko Bagaskara, and also Chalika Rahma Divani. Today, let's start with Edward Said's biography. It's gonna read by Chalika, please.
Edward Said biography. Edward Said was a Palestinian-American scholar and literary critic. As a professor at Columbia University, he became one of the leading figures in post-colonial studies. His own experience as an Arab living in the West gave him a unique critical perspective on how the West was perceived and misrepresented by Western culture. His book, Orientalism, critically examined how the West represented constructed and dominant in its understanding of the East through language, knowledge, and power. Next. Introduction. Orientalism is a concept introduced by Edward Said to explain how the West has historically represented and understood the East. According to Said, the Orient is not a natural given. It is a constructed concept invented and shaped by Western imagination. The Orient is often portrayed as exotic, mysterious, irrational, and inferior. While the West is seen as rational, modern, and superior, Said also identifies Orientalism in three ways: as an academic discipline, as a style of thought, and as an institution of power. Therefore, Orientalism is not only a field of study, but also a system of knowledge and power that shapes and justifies Western domination over Eastern societies.
All right. Thank you so much, very much, Chalika. Next, we move to the historical background of Orientalism. All right. In 1978, a Palestinian American scholar named Edward Said published a book titled Orientalism. As mentioned before, he wanted to explain a simple but dangerous phenomenon: how Western empires justified conquering the Middle East and Asia. Now, the roots go back to the 18th and 19th century, the golden age of European colonialism. When Britain and France invaded places like Egypt or India, they didn't just bring soldiers. They brought scholars, poets, and painters. These Europeans began painting pictures, writing books, and studying local languages. But they weren't doing this out of pure curiosity. By framing the Orient, also known as the East, as mystical, irrational, and backwards, Western powers created a convenient excuse as these people can govern themselves, so it is our moral duty to govern them. Next. Okay. Now, we move to the key concept of the other. The other, all right? To understand Orientalism, we have to understand how humans build identity. We usually define who we are by pointing out who we aren't. Said argued that the West invented the Orient to act as its ultimate opposite or the other. This isn't just about saying they are different than us, it's about a strict, unequal division. The West is the default corporate executive. Yeah, rational, peaceful, hardworking, logical, and modern. The other is the exotic caricature, emotional, chaotic, lazy, highly sexualized, and stuck in the past. Uh, think of old Hollywood movies depict the Middle East, mysterious deserts, belly dancers, and untrustworthy villains. That is the othering in action. By reducing an incredibly diverse group of billions of people into a flat, predictable stereotype, the West strips away their humanity and individuality. Next slide. We move to the ontology of Orientalism. In philosophy, ontology is the study of what is real and what actually exists. When we apply ontology to Orientalism, the big question is, does the Orient actually exist, or did the West just make it up? Said's answer is brilliant and a bit meta. He says the Orient, as Europeans describe, it is not a real place. It is a mental construct, an idea. However, because the West had all the money and power, they turned this fake idea into a concrete reality. They wrote, they wrote textbooks about it, passed laws based on it, and drew borders because of it. The ontological trap. The West created a fictional version of the East, treated that fiction as an absolute fact, and then used their power to force the real world to conform to that fiction. The ontology of Orientalism shows that power doesn't just control land, it controls truth. The West created a version of the East that served Western interests, and for centuries, that manufactured version replaced the messy, complicated reality of the people living there. Next, we move to the epistemology of Orientalism. Kevin, time is yours, please.
Okay, thank you. And now epistemology of Orientalism. In Orientalism, epistemology examines how knowledge about the East is produced and accepted as truth. Edward Said argues that Western understanding of the Orient was not merely discovered through objective observation, but was constructed through literature, art, academic studies, travel writings, and political discourse. This source created particular image of Eastern societies that reflected Western perspective and interest. And according to Said, these representations often portrayed the East as exotic, irrational, backward, or mysterious, while presenting the West as rational and superior. Over time, such portrayals becomes accepted as legitimate knowledge and influenced public perception of Eastern cultures. Therefore, Orientalism demonstrates that knowledge and power are closely connected, as those who control representation can shape how entire societies are understood.
Next is axiology of Orientalism, please. Jalika.
Axiology of Orientalism. The significance of Orientalism lies in its ability to reveal how knowledge can be used to construct and maintain power. Edward Said argued that Western representation of the East were often influenced by political and cultural interests. Orientalism also critiqued stereotypes and prejudice toward Eastern society. It showed how the East was frequently portrayed through bias and simplified image. The theory gives a voice to people who were often silenced because Eastern society were rarely represented on their own terms. Orientalism encouraged fairer and more accurate cultural representation. It also raised awareness of the relationship between culture, knowledge, and colonialism. The theory promotes critical thinking about representation in literature, media, and popular culture. In literary and cultural studies, Orientalism is used to analyze how the East is represented in texts, films, and media. It helps identify cultural bias and unequal power relations, while encouraging more critical interpretation of cultural products. Next.
Next, the examples, please. Kevin.
So, for example, as an example of Edward Said's theory of Orientalism, this presentation I use Disney's Aladdin 1992, and the film is set in the fictional city of Agrabah. which is inspired by various Middle Eastern cultural elements. Throughout the story, Agrabah is portrayed as an exotic and mysterious place filled with desert, palace, marketplace, and magical adventures. According to Said, such representations can reflect an Orientalist perspective by presenting the East as different, unfamiliar, and fascinating. This portrayal reflects Said's argument that cultural representation can shape knowledge about the East through stereotypes and imagination rather than reality.
Right? For the conclusion, please.
Okay, so for last, the conclusion. In conclusion, Edward says Orientalism demonstrates how the West has historically constructed and represented the East through its own perspective, interests, and system of power. By creating the Orient as the other, this representation often produces stereotypes that shape public understanding of Eastern societies. Such theory reveals that knowledge is not always neutral, but can be influenced by cultural and political power. Therefore, Orientalism remains an important approach in literary and cultural studies, encouraging us to critically examine how different cultures are represented in literature, film, media, and other forms of cultural expression.
All right. We think that's all from our material today. Thank you very much, everybody, Kevin and Jalika, for today's presentation. And we think that's all from the group 10 about the Orientalism for literary criticism subject. Thank you very much and good
Bye.
evening. Thank you.
Thank you.